Hello, welcome at the Republic of Innovators and welcome to the 6th round of the E.ON Energy Talk. Our today's theme is the circular economy, moving away from the take, make and dispose model. My name is Chris and I'm a circular business designer and managing partner at dify, which is a Berlin-based innovation consultancy. For the last 10 years, I've been working with and involved with numerous industrial projects that had the aim of transitioning a technology or a business model from the linear to the circular world. And as I'm much used to sitting on those panels like this one today, I'm less so in moderating them. So this has been a special moment for me, and I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion. In the next 30 minutes, I will share the stage with our 3 panelists, which I will introduce shortly. And after this, we will go into another 30 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So please feel free to send all your comments and questions into the chat window below that you can see on the screen below, also during the session or during the panel. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our distinguished panelists. First of all, we have Dr. Larissa Suzuki. Larissa is the lead data and AI practice for Google Cloud and a Google AI Principles Ethics Fellow. She's also an award-winning computer scientist, author, engineer, and entrepreneur, and her career includes 16 years working in engineering. She works on the interplanetary Internet of Things, Internet on Cloud Computing, and advises governments and corporations alike. Among other things, Larissa is more than equipped to help us to understand the data and information challenges behind the circular economy. Next up is Francis Ugboma. Francis is a civil engineer and MBA by training. He is the head of energy services at Islington Council, where he oversees energy and carbon-related strategy, development of infrastructure projects, and the operations around low-carbon smart district energy system. Last year, Islington's energy service brought into operation phase 2 of the Bunhill Heat Network, which is a project that takes waste heat from the London Underground transport system and uses that heat for low-carbon heating for over 1,500 homes. So, hello, Francis. And last but not least, Stefan Håkansson, who is the E.ON's Global Director of City Energy Solutions and CEO of E.ON Business Solutions. Stefan began his professional career at E.ON already in 1999. So with over 20 years of experience in the energy industry, Stefan brings us a rich source of practical experience that he will share with us today. And now, also, with no further ado, I would also like to kick off the session with an initial question. As a disclaimer, I shared this question also with the panelists and had one question that they can just keep it short and make it a teaser so that we can get a picture of your understanding of the circular economy. So the first question would be, please share with us one case. It could be a product, a service, an initiative or project that you see as a good example of the circular economy in practice. And I would like to start the round just by order of the windows I can see here with Stefan. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Christian. And thanks also for having me here. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about circular solutions and how we can speed the development of this up. One very good example I think we have is one which I myself has also been working on, is a project in Stockholm, Högbytorp is what we call it. It's a circular solution we have done, without going into too much of the details, save that for later. I think this is a very good example because engage all different stakeholders in finding a solution. And it's not only a technical solution, it's also engaging culturally on behavior areas and try to develop that going forward. It's about using the resources in the best possible way, in a true circular way, where we can find new usage areas in all parts of the value chain. It's about truly to see each part of a material as a resource. Nothing should get wasted. I'll be happy to tell you more of that as we go forward, because I think there are some key elements in our experience which was very difficult to make come true, because it was experiencing obstacles that was delaying this implementation. I'm very keen to discuss how we can speed up the implementation. And one of those specific key hurdles was that there is an uncertainty about how we can share the commercial grounds with the perspective of sustainability. We need to make it easier to understand that link. Thank you.
Very interesting, Stefan, and we very much look forward to all your insights. Larissa, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. So one example that I would give is the infrastructure mapping application for London. So this mapping application, what it does, it brings all the infrastructure providers an access to understand how the city is growing in London and what are the things that we have to put into place for the city to increase its circular economy by delivering joint projects, by not wasting resources, and by understanding how better services can be provided and how to recycle and to reuse sources of data also from one another. So this project has found that if it impacts congestion in just 1%, it would save transport for London 1.5 million a year, just by 1% of increase. And we see much more benefits coming out of this tool to help to coordinate how infrastructure is delivered in the City of London. So I would highlight that as a project that has a lot of potential for not only for London, but for other cities around the globe.
Very impressive, Larissa. Happy to hear more. Finally, Francis, welcome.
Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon, everyone. So the project that I would like to talk about that I believe conforms circular economy principles is that of the Green Skies project. And Green Skies is an acronym for Green, Smart, Community Integrated Energy Systems. And what this is a local energy system that we are developing for Islington. A local energy system that will integrate numerous low-carbon technologies covering heating, cooling, e-mobility, and also electricity, so power. And this will be really something that will be an innovative project, because one of the things that we are using as a local source of heat is waste heat from a local data center. And I'll be happy to share more information and detail on that later on during the talk.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Francis. Yeah, as you hear, most of those projects that we just heard of, they were all first-of-the-kind projects. So most of them were facing very specific challenges and hurdles that had to be overcome in order to scale and accelerate. So first thing that I would be very much interested in is, what was one of the biggest challenges or barriers that you faced in those projects? And what can we learn also as the community of innovators to overcome those barriers in order to accelerate the circular economy?
I can answer
Stefan, would you like to start? Or Larissa, yeah, you can start.
Okay, so what I saw in my case was, in the case of the project that I mentioned, was the ability to collect data and to share data with one another. And there's the trust element into what it is that we can do with the data that we collect, that we process, and that we distribute. And one of the things also that we saw was a lack of a standardization of how we see data, how do we see systems, and how do we see how technology is deployed. So that was one of the main key difficulties that we had to put into place projects like this. So I think access to data is something that is quite important, and access to standards also for you to represent the data is something that is imperative to have in order to put into place technology and artificial intelligence tools to help us to build a better planet.
Maybe I can just pick up on that from Larissa, because it's also very similar. The project that I started to present earlier in Stockholm is a very long-term project. It took us 8 years to get to the decision of actually starting building the project. And why is that? It was trust. It's all different stakeholders that need to understand what's in it for them, how will it work, and are all the prerequisites in place for it actually to happen. So there is this long-term perspective of not only politically by mandates of different electoral periods, but also how do we make sure this is something that will be developing and continues to take an ownership and accountability for 20, 30 years. It's continuous development with this reusing that is the key part. We have so many different players in building the cities and societies. There's all from the citizens going to the municipality, local politicians, but also local universities, media, press, and stakeholders, and of course the business itself. The B2B business, living and breathing there in the city, making also good enterprise development for them. How does this circular flow enable something that will help them develop their business? Needs to be some early guardrails, setting the beacon directive towards a future. That needs to be set in place with all stakeholders together around the table. That was not there in place. We see that is now emerging, especially in UK, with the climate emergency being declared and these discussions taking it forward. We see this 8 years being halved to 4 years. Still, that's too long. We need to progress. We do not have time to wait. Trust is my answer.
Very good, very good. Yeah, Francis, you already heard it's a multi-stakeholder challenge. So how did you face it in the Bonhill project?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think from our side, I'd like to focus on the technology aspect of it. And Larissa mentioned the importance of AI software to be able to really help us progress on the circular economy. So with respect to Green Skies, we are talking about integrating several types of different technologies. So we're talking about heat pump technology, battery storage, in conjunction with rooftop solar PV panels, and finally EV charging infrastructure and vehicle to grid systems. So all of these different technologies have to be integrated together and need to speak to each other successfully in order to respond to supply and demand variables throughout the operation of the project. And that's where artificial intelligence software comes into it. And that is really what we are seeing as the key to successfully delivering this project. That's the successful integration of different types of technologies.
Now, if we look at that information and data challenge, we see those two sides of the same coin. There is this multi-stakeholder issue where humans have to be in contact of functions, departments that never talked before. And at the same time, we have to join the same thing on the data side. We can focus on one of those both things or one of those two things, but maybe the interesting thing for now, maybe as an input from Larissa, would be, where do you see the main challenge of synchronizing all those data streams, being it material value flows or being it energy flows, or even the human flow of people moving around the city and consuming and not consuming? Larissa, do you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. So one of the things that we see is that bringing that data together is something that is quite difficult in terms of like how the data will come through the system. And some data, they have different temporal values. So for instance, we might have a combination of real-time data and batch data. And we have to make sure that we have that data in a data lake, and then we have that in a data warehouse. The difference between a data lake and a data warehouse is that in a data lake, we just dump the data that we collect. And the data warehouse is when we have the data prepared to be consumed by different systems and by AI, machine learning algorithms, for instance. And building that foundation is quite important and will determine how useful your data is going to be and how truthful your data outcomes is also going to be. So one of the things that we see in this value chain of data and information is to agree on common standards and agree on trust, agree on security protocols, on security agreements as well, so that we understand which data can be available to X, Y, and Z, and which data can be processed or not, and make that available to stakeholders, like the summary model card of the model we are building. For instance, if we're building an AI model, we have to give the information about the limitation of the model, which data was used, how that was formed into the system, and how that can be reutilized. Then we can apply technology into that data and bring that data to life. So what I see is that as we apply technology, we can have cleaner production, we can have better services, we can collect end of life, remanufacture those assets, and we can define how to best do that so we can minimize waste and reduce resource consumption as well. So, and also reduce the environmental footprint. So at the same time as achieving sustainability by AI, we can also help with the sustainability of AI. That is like making sure that we can optimize the technologies also being used to create a better good for the planet.
Thank you. And Francis, Stefan, from all what you've just heard, also with all the promises that AI comes along with, do you see any potential of using artificial intelligence, or at least the potential of it in scaling and accelerating your projects or projects alike?
Yes, definitely. Maybe I can start, Francis, since you also already concluded this to be a critical success factor for you. It is also for us what we're working with day to day. First, I must admit, this is difficult. We don't know how to do this fully. We are testing our way forward. We are failing every day and at the same time improving. It is challenging because there's just a terminology issue, which is very challenging. So I think it's correct. We need to standardize not only the protocols, but also the terminology of how we talk about it. Why is that important? Just take the common challenge for a city, a municipality, to make a tender, a public tender of how to progress and move the sustainability forward for the city. There's just so many challenges around this arena, so there's a huge need for standardization. However, I like to address the challenge that comes thereafter. To be able to do this, there is not one player that is going to do it. I work for E.ON. We're a very large utility player. I have a long experience with energy utilization and working, making the most of the energy in all different parts of the value chain. However, we cannot do this alone out of the energy perspective. We need to include all different players in this. We need jointly to develop the cities together towards a sustainable future. So we need to work much more together in partnership. And forming this kind of business model in open partnerships is also a very large challenge. Everybody wants to take a piece of the cake of value going forward, but exactly how that will look like is very challenging. So also that needs to be discussed further. And here, data again, transparency comes with data. That's a huge enablement with that. It's a very important part that we need to drive forward also more.
Thanks for that, Stefan. And just to build on what you said, the lack of standardization around terminology and protocols is a huge challenge for us as we progress the project through the detailed design phase and through the business case within the council's own governance process. And yes, so when we are learning as we go along, because it's all very new, and effectively finding the right type of partners at the tender stage is crucial to the success of the project for us.
Very good. At this point, I would also like to remind you as the audience, if you have any add-on questions, comments, or questions that totally aim into a different direction, please put them in the chat. It will be in 10 minutes, then we will open the whole room to the global community, and then we will also answer those questions. But maybe coming back to the stream of discussion that we just had, if we look at this main issue of information architecture and the challenge, and you, Stefan, said it perfectly right, it's failing forward, but in a positive sense with experiments. Can you think of one of the stakeholders that you would really love to have at the table at a certain time in the development of such a project that you don't see right now at being at the table? Stefan?
Yeah, I think what is challenging for us today is to really get close to the end users when we are doing infrastructure projects. We are close to many of our customers and talking to the customers, but in the end, their customers are the end users, the citizen of the city. And when we are talking about the target image, it's also addressing behavioral topics. It's addressing the drives and just the heart of people. How do we reach that? How do we develop together with the people in the city? How do we get the people to be proud of their city? And how can we together drive the development into this future? So finding a way of getting the citizen much closer to the development also for infrastructure project is very challenging. Taking just the municipality or the boroughs in London, how do we actually have the right people there raising their voice? That's something I would like to see if we can find new ways of doing.
Francis, yeah, sure, Larissa, please.
Sorry, I was just keen to build on that. One of the things that I also have observed is that in many projects, we don't see the techies sitting at the table where decisions they are made. So we see a lot of people here who are amazing policy making and decision making process in terms of how to enable smart and sustainable cities and circular economy. But I see quite often that people who build the technology, I think the first point is that we have to get close to the customers. So I would see that. And then the second would be to get the people who build those technologies and bring them to life to also sit at the table where decisions they are made, because we can address them together. What are types of technologies that will hinder our ability to scale or that will support us? So one of the things that I also see missing from some of the debate about how do we build a better circular economy is not having the technologists sitting at the table as well. So I would like to see that more.
Yeah, very good point, Larissa, very good.
Yes, and so, yes, from my side, Christian, I think I'd like to respond to that question by illustrating just how the project team for Green Skies is comprised. So we, as Islington, are working as part of a consortium of 16 different organizations, and this covers corporations such as E.ON, which is a key partner for us in the project, but also academia, so Friends at London South Bank University, community engagement groups, local architecture firm, Cullinan Studio, and others, many others that I don't have time to go into now on the talk. But all in all, there are 16 of us to help deliver the business case for this project, and that just underlines the importance of range of partnerships that you need to be able to deliver what is something that is completely new in many respects. And so I think that real life example, I think, is how I would best respond to that question, Christian.
Yeah, very good. And also in the preparation to that talk, you mentioned one example, and I think that pretty good binds it back to Stefan's take on bringing the customer in, that the challenges that we have to define before starting those projects have to make sense for the end customer as well. You mentioned one of the incentive schemes that London is trying to implement or trying to test, where behavior might be incentivized that looks forward into the circular economy. Maybe you can get into that again. Francis?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was on mute briefly. Yes, so really, to take that forward, I think we should take, it's important to note that the project that we see as can be scalable and replicated. So if we take the entire borough of Islington, we have several iterations of the same type of project for different communities within the entire borough. And this one example that we're looking to bring forward will act as a replicator model for other communities within the borough, but also in other cities and in other countries to be able to replicate in their own local environment. I think the key is to have a local energy system, an example of a local energy system, and that it is just replicated nationwide, internationally, based on the success of and the conditions at the local level.
Okay, Larissa, maybe getting back to the whole issue of accelerating and moving into the transition to a circular economy. You said that the information architecture is key and that connecting all those partners and finding a common language, common standards is better to make it feasible. Sure, with the hint of bringing in technologists early on to the table for decision making. But later on, when you scale up those solutions, what's normally the biggest barrier, or at the same time, the biggest solution that you came across in order to accelerate that transition after scaling up or after the startup? Sorry.
Yeah, so one of the things that we see when we started ramping up a solution is always like to try to see whether we are meeting the KPIs, whether this technology we build justify the amount that we are getting. So for instance, as an example is, we have always to see whether the technology is a viable product. And it can be a very great idea, but if the amount of energy, the amount of costs that you're going to have by building a technology does not justify the end results, that is a technology that shouldn't be developed, I think, in the first place. But when we are ramping up solutions, one of the things that we see is that that is like very important and sometimes quite difficult is to collect the feedback from users at the start of the ramping up, so that if anything happens that is not okay, if there's any issues, especially with like outputs of machine learning algorithms, we can correct that straight away. So getting the feedback from the users, that is something that is quite important, and you have to be very disciplined in that collection of feedback. For us also to ramp up, we also have to make available always the data that is fresh. So whenever like there's new data, that should be available into the system, and we should always monitor the quality of the data throughout our pipeline, especially when we design artificial intelligence that are not hard-coded by us, that it learns from the data it sees, because the model is going to be as good as the data that it sees. So one of the things that I think is also to keep the data fresh, the data always clean. And if we identify any issues or data drift, we have to make sure that we correct those, because that will impact the end product that we provide to the user. So I would say that we have to test for usability of the service, reliability, and the trust, whether our models are also trustful. And we only can be sure of that if we have some sort of explainability. So whenever you build systems that will affect the end user somehow, it's always the case to build explainable AI, explainable tools that you can identify why certain decisions that were made and why such predictions were also justifiable. So I would say that for ramping up is like ensuring we collect feedback from users, we continue to maintain the reliability of the data, and also provide explainability of everything that we are doing, so that we can be sure that whatever we are doing is creating great outputs, not only for the city and for businesses, but also for the citizens that are the end users and consumers of our products.
Yes, thank you, Larissa. Stefan, from what you just heard, I think that binds back to your argument of involving the user. Does E.ON use any type of early on user feedback loops and collecting the feedbacks, not only during the project development, but also during ramp up or afterwards?
Yes, we are. The question is if what we're doing is enough. So we are today first in the early stage trying to talk not only through the local permit process, but also having open forums where we try to attract citizens to come and have open forums and discussions. We had several of those in the project we discussed before in Stockholm. We're doing the same in Berlin for the large city that is being developed through the old airport Tegel. And we're also doing the same in Milano with the Expo that is now being developed into a new sustainable part of the city. However, the challenge is that we are most of the time attracting quite few people that are very interested, like the early movers, the people that are very committed to this journey. How do we reach the other part of that stakeholders is a question we are puzzled with. The second topic I like to link to this, digitization is probably the most extreme topic in itself where it makes sense to standardize, as we said before, because if you make a good solution, you can utilize it everywhere else. However, circularity, and it's super dependent on the local prerequisites. So there is very difficult to find one size fits all and roll it all over the world. You always need to start with the local prerequisites, like in France's example, where utilizing the waste heat from the subway. There's local regulations and local other prerequisites with builders and utilizers in London that is not applicable in Stockholm or Berlin or elsewhere. So we always need to find the local prerequisites. And here, the local sourcing is super important, that we are utilizing what's already there, because we do believe that cities will be self-suppliant in the future. We need to use the waste from its city in itself. Waste heat coming from fans going up in the air, not being utilized, or also resources that is normally just thrown on a landfill or built in a combustion with poor usage. This kind of locality, we need to enable the digital movement to utilize this locality. That's also one of the challenges together with the stakeholder engagement.
Very good, Stefan. Francis, you're leaning in.
Yes. No, I was getting excited about the Stefan's comments about cities being self-supplying, self-sufficient, because that's definitely what is driving our energy network development within Islington. You yourself, Christian, mentioned in the introduction how we're taking waste heat already from London Underground to heat over 1,500 homes as part of our Bun Hill project. For this first Green Skies project, we're looking at waste heat from a local data center. We have done a heat mapping exercise for our entire borough, where we are looking and have identified sources of heat, be it from data centers, be it from sewers or underground rivers and so forth. So the idea that Stefan mentioned of local prerequisites is key to that. So every locality, every community should have a strong understanding of what they can produce locally, and if that means harnessing waste, then so be it. That's even better.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's a good transition also to one of the first questions from the audience. And I still encourage you to add some more questions to it. It comes to the question of metrics and impact of the whole initiatives. So just maybe looking back at your project, Francis, how would you measure the success of your project after 5 years? Where would you like to be, and how would you see it as a successful project? And how do you measure the extent of transitioning to the circularity?
Thanks for that. It's a great question. So before we embark on any such project, there has to be a thorough analysis of what are the outcomes, what are the benefits to our residents for such a project. And in the case of Green Skies, we are looking at three key metrics. One is that of the carbon emissions reduction. So for the first iteration of the Green Skies project, we're looking at saving some 2,000 tons of carbon emissions per annum. The second metric would be on consumer energy bills. We would want the project to deliver affordable energy to our residents. And the third key metric is related to that of carbon reductions, and that's an improvement of air quality. And over the course of the project, and certainly within the first 5 years, we would want to see a beneficial outcome measured across those three metrics for our residents.
Very interesting, Francis. Larissa, do you have any key matrices or key impact criteria that you use in order to evaluate the success of circular projects?
Well, I think that depends on the project and what are the stakeholders and what are the outcomes of projects. But I see that we have to see metrics from all over the entire circular economy, but also the technology applied to this. So one of the things that I would take into account is like the change that has been made into the city, and what are for instance, if we wanted to reduce the emissions, so we would collect metrics related to emissions, and we would follow track those metrics alongside the development of the project. We should also make sure that if anything we put into a production environment, for instance, a system, we have to make sure that the system is reliable, there's no fault into that system, and that is always available. We have to ensure the SLAs, the service level agreements, they also are agreeable, and it's also into place at all the times. And we also have to ensure that the quality of the data that we provide is also a metric that we can collect. We can do a lot of statistical analysis into data as soon as the data arrive, as soon as the data leave as well. So I think that metrics from a technology standpoint, from a user standpoint, and from a KPI from the city standpoint, that should be taken into account. And that will depend upon like what are the type of project that you are building and what it is that the outcome for the city is.
Yeah, very good. Stefan, from all the matrices and all the key performance indicators that you just heard, which of those would you like to maximize in the next 5 years for the projects that you were referring to?
It's a good question. It's I think we should try to aim to focus on those KPIs or measurements that is best measuring the circularity over time. Of course, there's some basic elements linking to sustainability and recyclability. However, I think it's going deeper into the second stage, which we should also further measure. And for the project that I referred to earlier, it's about recycle metals from ashes, reducing the waste that goes into end depository, like in landfills, and improving the recircle share of all the material resources. For instance, when we are utilizing biogas from food waste, and the food waste, there should be a measurement of how much of the food waste, the substrate, goes into biogas, and that should increase over time. That's how we also engage the local citizens. And in the end, we have this view that this vision that we want our customers to pay for the energy, electricity and heat, depending on how good they are in sorting out their waste. If you're really good, you will have low energy costs because you create value in the other part of the value chain if you are good in sorting. That's a true area of actually measuring how good we are in circularity. There's a lot of miles to cover before we're there, but that's really our vision. That's really engaging also the local citizens in embarking on the journey for true sustainability.
Francis, you are nodding. Would you like to add? Otherwise, I would have another question. Sure.
No, that's absolutely. I think absolutely the right approach is to get consumers, residents, citizens engaged, and to take responsibility for their own behaviour, and the manifestation of that good behaviour, if you like, would be a positive outcome for all involved. So lower energy cost is an outcome that we're always targeting as a key benefit for our project. So I would just support that statement by Stefan.
Larissa, I hope it's not too hard of a challenge yet now, but hearing of that incentive use case, here we want to connect the behavior of a citizen with, for example, the actual utility bill that comes up at the end. What kind of infrastructure or basic steps within the development would be needed, also from data perspective, in order to make such a thing feasible?
The first thing that we have to do, I think, is to firstly understand what is the data that we can collect at the time of the design of the system, because the feedback loops that we collect, especially like behavior or feedback from users, that might be done in a data collection manner, or we can see that through KPIs coming, for instance, from the transportation industry, from the energy industry, that can see that the energy that was consumed by buildings has been reduced, for instance. That is an example. So we have to define a little bit in the infrastructure, how do we collect those feedback loops? If by data collection, we have to ensure that we have the security associated with that, and that we know that we can collect data from certain users, and how that data will be processed has to also match the regulatory standards and requirements of that particular location. And if we do understand how things are changing, is also going to be a very good place for us to mention a little bit about explainability, because some of the things that we can see is that, for instance, a particular KPI might be, for instance, achieved, for instance, reduction of carbon footprint, but we might not know where that is coming from. So having for instance, explainable systems, we are able to ensure that we understand what it is that has contributed the most for us to reduce that environmental footprint. So if that is by recycling, increasing in particular neighborhoods, I have seen applications that deal with that. So there's a project called Big Belly, and what they do, they put places for people to throw away trash, but also to throw away recyclables. And they do not only track the trash to better route logistics, but also they track how much recycle that particular community has had. And one community can compete with another, and you have that competition kind of idea between citizens into the city. And that data fed by those Internet of Things devices is what is going to help us to collect feedback loops that we need to ensure that we are meeting those metrics. So I think that it would be enabling the technology to be safe, to be secure, to comply with regulatory processes, and have analytics tools to enable us to process that in real time, and also add the power of explainability to explain what are the variables that are most important when we talk about environment footprint in a particular city.
Mm.
Yeah, very good, very interesting. Also perfectly adds to a question that also came from the audience, which is from Gerhard Radke, whose opinion is that there are too less use cases for the normal customer to make really sense and be aware of the circular economy. You, Larissa, now mentioned the Big Belly example. Do any other examples come to your mind that really illustrate the sense-making of the circular economy also to the end customer? So not the big infrastructure projects, but something that really involves or that we can experience in our daily life. Maybe you, Stefan?
There's just so many. I think this is a maybe a communication challenge that we need to be able to get it out easier. We have actually quite exciting, funny examples. Like we had this heat squad running around trying to find heat leakages. And one of the biggest heat leakages in one of our mid-sized cities in Sweden was the ice hockey arena. When making ice, the backside of the coolers were just emitting heat up in the air. We managed to make a technical solutions and engaging one of the real estate companies. So we're feeding that heat back in and actually heating more than 100 homes, annual heating a year because of this recycling solution. That is not always engaging everybody else, but the local people in Örebro got very engaged in that. And I think this kind of local communication is very important because it addresses the locality and make local citizens proud of what they are doing, where they are living and for their city. And this is super important. We have many similar examples from cities all around Europe. The London subway is one of the most prominent one. It's a huge subway. Each station is a big heat leakage in itself, like Francis is addressing with the Green Skies project. We have the similar solution in mind in Italy, in Milano, where there was built up a large infrastructure with Milano Expo for the House Expo. And then how do you utilize the existing infrastructure and the waste from that and using that to build up the city again in a sustainable way? There's just so many of these examples we need to be able to get out. So I see it as a communication issue.
Francis, would you like to add one particular example?
Well, see, a particular example, I would just go back on towards what we discussed earlier about how we as a borough have done a mapping exercise of all utilizable sources of waste heat in the entire borough, and in an ideal circular economy, there will be no more of these instances of waste heat. Every utilizable amount of waste heat should be recycled, and that's really where we want to get to as part of our mission. So, I mean, we have lots of examples, as Stefan mentioned, in London Underground, and we're looking at the data centers and the like for tapping into utilizable sources of waste heat.
And maybe I can quickly ask that Francis, in Germany, there's 53,000 data centers today being in operation. 53,000. They're using a huge amount of energy, primary energy. How do we utilize that secondary energy on the behalf of the cities? I don't think we need more primary energy. No. We just need to use the one that is already there.
Absolutely.
For the main part of the discussion, we are now focusing on the today, or maybe to the next 1 or 2 years. But maybe using this round here now and the opportunity to discuss also not only the far future, but also medium future, we see the urgency of change and that we have to transition and accelerate the whole movement. What do you think might be, not only might be possible, but what will be possible in the next 5 to 10 years in order to really, really make a step forward, and not asking from the perspective of today, but maybe put yourself into 5 years' time, what will be possible then in order to transition to the circular economy? And this was also a question that was posed by the audience, especially by Andreas Klapdor, who is asking, okay, the projects are feasible today, but what else? What's possible tomorrow? Maybe, Larissa, would you like to start?
Well, I think that as we move along, circular economy is going to become a topic more open, discussed amongst people. So people are going to be more informed about the benefits of this. So I see a great wave of people really worried about our sustainability and the impact that we have on our planet and how it's great for us to be more sustainable. I see a lot of companies also adopting this circularity and the sustainability as well. And I believe that as companies, they become more aware of those and want really to meet sustainability agenda, they're going to collect more information and will take more care of that information. And also will be willing to share some of those to enable like a better good to be made, for instance, into cities by understanding how businesses are operating. So I see like in the future, with the amount of data we're going to have and with more consciousness efforts from companies and citizens, we're going to be able to have a wealth of data and information that we can use for us to develop like more advanced artificial intelligence applications that will not only sense the environment, but will also actuate on the environment to ensure that we can adapt for what is going on at the moment. So for instance, we can have data centers like training machine learning models at the time that energy is cheaper. So we can do all those types of things, not only collect, but also actuate. So I believe that we are moving to a future where technology is becoming possible and we have the art of the possible. All the pieces are available. I think we just have to be creative and innovative to bring those technologies together to enable a future where we can sense the environment in real time and also actuate in real time. So I see us moving towards that future of deep actuation and informed actuation.
Very good. Any parts of those pictures of the future that you would like to add, Francis?
Yes, absolutely. I would sort of build on what Larissa said by adding that my sense of the future is that we will have in 5 years' time definitely more local supply chains for a lot of the goods and services that we enjoy today. And that localism will act as an enabler of further circularity. I think it's easier to implement a circular economy if you are talking on a local scale rather than on a global supply chain. But so for me, I think I'll be excited to see more goods being produced on local supply chains.
Stefan, any words of not only optimism, but maybe even criticism to see what's actually possible in the next 5 years, but also what needs to be possible, what must be implemented in order to become circular?
There's a lot of musts. One must is that local regulation needs to change to enable true utilization of local resources. We cannot have strange regulation not allowing PV to be integrated from local rooftops to the system. We cannot have a preferred way of seeing sustainability excluding biogas utilization. That's just you can actually say it's a crime towards sustainability. So that needs to change, and I truly believe it will. It's about transparency and understanding at many different stakeholders. And, it's really going in that direction. So I'm very optimistic. Furthermore, if we do this good, we will actually have a more of a sharing society. The school needs energy between 9 and 3. The apartments around the school needs energy between in the morning and the evening. There is a way of sharing in the peaks and optimizing the system in a lot better way. And this is also sustainability at its heart. Finally, we talked also about digitization. Digitization is truly one of the large enablers for us to progress this area. One of the big challenges with that is also the personal integrity. We talked about the good project Big Belly. It's also about getting the data without compromising with personal integrity. Do I agree with someone measuring what I throw away and how I sort things? I need to agree that we also need to mature in the way of being able to use data with this challenge. The personal integrity is a large obstacle to try to standardize this at the moment, and we need to find solutions for that as well. And I believe we will, because people generally see sustainability to be an overarching challenge that we all need to embark on.
Very good. That already sounded like, although I didn't ask for like a closing statement, so very much thanks to you, Stefan. But maybe that also leads to one of the closing question that I would like to pose to you. We didn't discuss or touched upon the regulatory frameworks and the laws and regulations that need to be in place. Stefan, you already told us your view on that now, but maybe now for the last words to Larissa and Francis again. If you would have the power to decide on, let's say, one piece of law, one piece of regulation that needs to be in place in order to make the world more circular, what regulation would that be? What regulation would you like to change? Maybe Francis, would you like to start?
Yes, I think with respect to the regulation, the one thing that I would think would have the biggest effect is a prioritization of local sources for all supply chains. I know I'm a specialist in the energy sector, and so where possible, we want to implement local energy systems. And Stefan himself, said that there should be in urban centres there should not really be any need for any primary energy to be used. It should just be recycled energy. And so for me, I think at a regulatory level, a prioritization above all else of local sources for the products that we all consume, I think in the first instance will be the one enabler that will really take off a circular economy.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. Larissa, do you see any piece of legislation or regulation that you would like to see in place?
Yes, so following what Francis said, that it was very well covered, I think like for us to enable circularity to take place and for us to collect information about the environment, for us to see the impact of anything that we put into place, is also have privacy legislation to ensure that the data that we consume and that we distributed, they are privacy protected, and that we have also security, like legislation around security and fairness as well. So I believe that those would be the top key things, that is like legislation around the use of responsible AI and responsible technologies.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Larissa. As you can see, time is flying. It's 3 minutes. 3 minutes to the whole hour. We scratched upon lots of topics. We didn't discuss most of the questions in very detail and to the end, which is why I kindly invite you to the community. But first of all, I would like to give a warm thank you to the panelists, Francis, Larissa, and Stefan. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then also thank you to the global audience. Thank you for giving us the questions. Thank you for giving us your valuable time, also joining this session. I hope and also invite you to move on with the discussion on the Innovation Community Platform. Go there, go around and also discover what other discussions, what other people and enthusiasts you will meet there. Use the ability to connect and engage with other community members. And last but not least, feel free to participate at this year's E.ON's Innovation Flagship event, the E.ON Energy Innovation Days, which will take place from the 5th to the 7th of October. So take your time to take a look at the amazing agenda. Thank you again for being here. Thank you again for inviting me. Thank you again to the panelists, to the audience. Stay healthy and goodbye.